On February 5, 2004, 17-year-old Nicholas Rolo was participating in a hockey tournament game on the South Ring at Omega Ice. During the game, he experienced a sudden cardiac arrest and collapsed on the ice. Two mothers of the participant in the event left the stands and responded to the medical emergency. Nancy DePoy held a nursing degree and was licensed in California. Linda Albright had completed a first responders course and a nurse's aid course. Albright assisted DePoy in administering CPR to Nicholas Rolo. Someone named Amy from Omega Ice called 911 to report the incident to the appropriate emergency responders. In addition, Kevin Ward, a visiting coach for one of the hockey teams, called 911 on his cellular phone. Both of these calls were made approximately at the same time, shortly after Nicholas Rolo collapsed. Albright and DePoy performed CPR to the emergency medical personnel. Despite these efforts, Nicholas Rolo did not survive. At some time prior to the incident, one or more AEDs had been acquired and installed at the Omega Ice facility. Defendant San Diego Sports and Entertainment had placed one AED on the wall in the arena near the penalty box of the South Ring where Rolo collapsed. So San Diego Sports and Entertainment had not informed the tournament participants, the coaches, and the officials, or spectators of the existence and locations of the AEDs. No one was aware that the AEDs was installed and available for use in close proximity to the South Ring. Neither one of the referees officiating the game was aware of the AEDs. Both Albright and DePoy had been trained and certified in the use of AED. Kevin Ward, who placed one of the 911 calls, was asked by the dispatcher whether there was one of those Hawk Shop boxes on the premises. Unaware that there was one nearby, Ward responded that there was no such device available.
On February 5, 2004, 17-year-old Nicholas Rolo died after suffering sudden cardiac arrest while participating in an ice hockey tournament at Omega Ice. The tournament was held on the south rink of the facility in San Diego, California. Following the incident, two mothers from the stands performed CPR on Nicholas until the emergency medical personnel arrived on the scene. Prior to this emergency, one or more AEDs had been installed in the Omega Ice facility, but no one at the facility was aware of the existence or location of an AED. The series of events that brought about the unfortunate death of Nicholas Rolo were directly related to the gross, ordinary, and perhaps even willful negligence at the facility of which the incident occurred. If someone had known where the AED was, Nicholas Rolo would most likely still be alive.
We are here to defend San Diego Sports and Entertainment Facility and their operators. We believe that the facility and their operators were not at fault for the death of Nicholas Rolo. Under California law, Omega Ice is not required to provide AEDs for invitees at the facility. Therefore, they did provide the standard of care.
They were only required to call an emergency dispatch at the time of the emergency. We have evidence that Amy, an employee from Omega Ice, immediately called the dispatch and requested emergency vehicle at the time of the incident. AEDs recently installed. The facility did not have significant time to train employees on the use and location of the AED.
According to California Code of Regulations Health and Safety Code, no less than one employee per AED unit shall complete a training course in the AED regulations adopted by Emergency Medical Service Authority and the standards of the American Heart Association or the American Red Cross. There must be a written plan that describes the procedures to be followed in the event of an emergency that may follow the use of an AED. And further, it is the policy of the state of California that people shall be encouraged and trained to assist others at the scene of a medical emergency.
Gross negligence is a conscious and voluntary disregard of the need to use reasonable care, which is likely to cause foreseeable grave injury or harm to a person. Chapter 3, Article 5 states, acquirers of an AED unit shall have trained employees who shall be available to respond to an emergency that may involve the use of an AED unit during normal operation hours. Front desk employee was not aware of the AED or the location. According to Chapter 3, Article 5, employees shall not only know the location of the AED, but know how to use it.
The AEDs had been recently installed in the facility and they did not have the appropriate time to train the employees on the use and location of the AEDs. Omega Ice is not considered a health club, so the facility was not required to even have an AED on site, but in order to create a more safe environment, one was purchased, going beyond our call of duty.
We understand our facility owes our invitees the duty to call 911, which Amy from Omega Ice did do. EMS also should have had an AED with them when responding to an emergency call.
Someone watching the game should have spotted an AED considering it was very close to where the boy collapsed. The coach who called 911 immediately told dispatcher that there was not an AED on location and the dispatcher could not properly identify or describe the AED.
The parents, coaches, and refs should have also asked where an AED was located before the event began, which they didn't. We understand that in the future we should have an emergency response plan, but the law does not require recreational businesses to have one.
In conclusion, on many occasions when an accident occurs, the victim is lucky enough to be in the presence of a first responder or someone certified to assist them medically. When Nicholas Rolo collapsed on the ice, the individual was unaffiliated with the San Diego ice rink, including the nurse and mother of another hockey player, acted as any reasonable first responder would, and delivered care to the best of their ability. These individuals, protected under the Reasonable Man Act, cannot be blamed for the neglect of the use of the AED. As is now very clear, when the responsibility then fell on the institution to follow through with proper incident response, they fell short. The AED that was on site was left unused. This begs the question of not only gross and ordinary negligence, but even willful negligence. The actions of the facility can hardly be called going beyond the call of duty when such actions are incomplete and rendered completely and totally useless at the time such safety measures are needed. The San Diego ice rink had an unquestionable legal duty of foreseeability in the running of a facility that caters to recreation that carries such high risk as ice hockey. The managerial staff of the ice rink should have been competent enough to use reasonable anticipation of risk and most of all common sense. Whether or not it was a legal duty of the facility to have an AED on site is not the issue at hand. The issue is that the facility did have an AED on site and failed to adhere to the responsibilities of having such devices. The facility was obviously competent enough to foresee the possible need for such devices, but failed to actually use them in the event of the emergency. Now it is up to you, the jury, to decide if our defendants' nonfeasance actions or the total neglect of life-saving acts that led to the tragic death of a young boy were indeed reasonably prudent in their foresight to protect the plaintiff against unreasonable risk.
In regards to the death of 17-year-old Nicholas Rolo, the bottom line is that under California law and legislation, health clubs that offer multiple facilities are required to have one AED. However, a facility that only offers one specific sport, like Omega Ice, is not a health club by definition, meaning that they are not required to provide an AED. Omega Ice was going over and beyond the call of duty by having 2 AEDs available, when they are not required to have one. In order to be proven guilty of negligence, the duties of recreation providers for invitees includes protection from the injury related to the condition of the land, facilities, or equipment, or by injury from third parties, not cardiac arrest.